Hi, everybody. Welcome again to the National Association of Adoptees and Parents Adoption Happy Hour. We're really pleased to have you here with us today. May 16th, 2025. We have a great guest here today, Connor Howe, who we'll be introducing momentarily. And before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. Beth, would you like to display that? Thank you so much. Let me read this for you, everybody. So a reminder that our intent here is to educate, elevate, and empower. And of course, we are all about centering adoptee voices in this space. And of course, supporting also birth parents and support for adoptive parents. And some reminders, please remain on mute. Raise your hand either on screen or the virtual hand to be recognized. And I will call on you at that point when it's time for the Q&A after the recorded session of the meeting here. You may post your comments or questions in the chat. In fact, we encourage it. It usually adds greatly to the conversation that's going on. Please know if you're experiencing a serious mental health event or suicidal thoughts, contact a licensed professional or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, dialing 988. And a reminder that this is a public meeting with no guarantee that information or identity is confidential, and portions of this event are recorded and may be shared in our private happy hour group on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. So I think, Beth, you have made some announcements already, so it looks like we're probably ready to get started here. So I'd like to introduce our guest tonight here. Connor Howe is an adopted person. He's an activist, a marketer, and a writer. And online, you'll undoubtedly know him as Adopted Connor. And I would say his content is direct, incisive, hard-hitting, always backed up with facts, and he lays bare the societal landscape of adoption, exposing fallacies, assumptions, misunderstandings, and outrages over how adoptees are viewed and treated. Connor is currently writing a memoir on his experience of open adoption, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you, Connor. Welcome to Adoption Happy Hour.
Thanks for having me, Greg. Good to see some familiar faces here.
Great. Yeah, I was really excited to have the opportunity to speak to you. And of course, we have a couple things in common. One of them is I was adopted from the same area that you were, as we've had that discussion. And I know we'd like to hear, of course, some of your adoption story. And then there are a few topics I thought it would be great to hit tonight, including the subject I think most people will be interested in is open adoption and your perspective on that, because you have
Yeah.
a very informed, lived perspective on that, and you speak very vocally about it all over the platforms. And I can say that as I've observed people interacting with you and commenting in other spaces, how much they appreciate the way that you're very direct about this. And you raise and elevate awareness for us, because for some adoptees, we may have thought, wouldn't that be more of an ideal thing than a closed adoption, like someone like myself, a domestic adoptee from the baby scoop era? Was that possibly better? But I think you're here to help us understand some of the things from your perspective on that. And then I'd also like to talk about your role as an advocate, because you, again, are a very powerful force on our scene here. And I think as an up and coming person and somebody who's been shown to be a very uncompromising standard setter for adoptee voices, that we'd really like to hear from you about how advocacy came about for you and what it means to you, and maybe some suggestions for people who'd like to be advocates. And then I'd like, of course, to tie it all into the idea here that male adoptee voices are largely underrepresented all over the spaces. And so really excited to have you here. Again, thanks very much for your time. And so maybe we could get started a little bit with your adoptee story.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Greg. It's like really nice. Yeah, so I mean, okay, the whole story is my mom, my biological mom, was like, I think 18. Actually, I should say she moved out of her parents' house like as at like 16 or 17, I want to say. Um, I don't really know every detail of those circumstances. I mean, I've been told like from both sides or whatever. I don't know. It's not that relevant, I guess. But she dropped out of high school, moved to Ireland, and started dating my biological father. Dating, don't really know what that means. But yeah, she got pregnant, and at the time, like contraception wasn't really even a thing in Ireland. I don't think she knew what condoms were. And so yeah, my dad was not that interested in being a parent, and at the time, I should say. And so she was like kind of faced with like kind of that decision that everyone in that position has to make, right? And so living in another country, I think she spent a little bit more time in Ireland, but at some point while she was pregnant, she flew back to the US. Um, got in touch with like the church and stuff, and eventually decided to, relinquish me for adoption. So technically I'm a domestic infant adopted person, but like, I kind of also have a father who's like completely Irish, never been to America. So, um, yeah, that's kind of a weird part of my story, I guess. All that to say, yeah, I mean, I grew up in this house I'm sitting in right now, like in San Diego, in like quote unquote an open adoption. I don't even like saying open adoption without quotes because it's like it's such an ambiguous thing. And I feel like there's two completely different meanings to it. There's open adoption before the adoption happens, and there's open adoption after the adoption is like facilitated. Open adoption before the decision is made is this promise, right? It's like this is what your life will look like for everyone involved, right? There's this like picture that is painted, but then there's like what does open adoption actually mean when you're in it? And it's completely contingent on really one party. And if that one party is like totally, we want this to happen, you still have to get the natural mother interested, you still have to get the adopted person interested. And that's, getting every single person to align on something, even if everyone has the best intentions, is very difficult. So, yeah, I mean, I saw my biological mother probably about once a year growing up. I didn't even realize until probably the past year or so, actually like past couple of months, I would say. Because I've been trying to write this memoir. I mean, that's a very generous thing to say. I'm writing a memoir. I'm like probably, 2 pages into it. I've been, my adoptive parents have been really helpful, giving me all this documentation and stuff from when I was a kid. And I found out that, when I was in fifth grade, I did this psychological evaluation. And in the psychological evaluation, it was said that I went ages 3 to 7 without ever seeing my biological mother, which I didn't even realize that. I was never told that. I don't have any recollection. I never had a recollection of that. So, I mean, I would go on podcasts and tell my story without even realizing that, like, I went 4 years without seeing my mom as a kid. Um, and I don't really know what the exact reason for that was, but um, as charitably as I can say it, I really believe that at some level, professionals had told my adoptive parents that it would be best for me to go that time without seeing my mom, even though in the psychological evaluation that I was at, I had said I wanted to see my mom. And it had been at the time, I think like 9 months since I had seen her in that evaluation. But yeah, I mean, ever since I was a kid, I'd always had all the problems I feel like anyone in one of these calls might be dealing with, where, by age 4, it was very obvious to everyone in my family, my adoptive family, that there was something different about me, that I was really having significant issues with a lot of things. I was like a straight A student throughout my entire life, but I was always the kid that was in trouble in my family. Um, and yeah, that was very often. I should also say I have an adoptive sibling who is the biological child of my adoptive parents. He's like 4 months younger than me. So we're like artificial twins basically, and that was its own. I could talk for hours about that. Basically, it's terrible, but we're in a decent place. But yeah, growing up, like it was really challenging. We had like all of the negatives of a brother relationship without really any of the positives, I would say. Um, and so, I mean, yeah, I always felt like the black sheep. I always kind of felt, I think, the typical like adoptee feeling, so to speak. I'm trying to think of anything else to add. I mean, yeah, like, so for me growing up, because my dad was such a mystery and my mom wasn't as much of a mystery, it was really the dad stuff that I always associated all of my issues to, and kind of everyone in my life. I feel like it was easy to make my dad a scapegoat because none of us knew him and he was never there. I mean, obviously I have my own issues with my mom as well, but I think my dad being this guy in Ireland is a very easy target. And so all of my frustrations, I feel like, were directed in that direction. And when I was like in my 20s, early 20s, when I was in college, I was in Ireland for the first time. I've always felt this really profound connection to Ireland, but that was really the first time where I was like, I actually think I want to find my dad. I mean, I'd always felt like that, but how do you go to Ireland? How do you convince your family to go to Ireland? So I never even thought of asking for that. But when I was there, I was like, oh, I might as well. I had my adoptive family reach out to like his sister or something like that. And then she responded back and said no, basically, like, get out of our business. They never said it to me directly. I heard from my adoptive parents that that was what was said. Um, and so when I reached back out, like about 10 or so years later, maybe like 8 or 10 years later, um, she was like, No, I already told you no the first time. I was like, well, you never said it to me. So yeah, I was back in Ireland last year, actually in September, and I had the opportunity to, I knew where my family would, I knew at least my brother would be there, which I'm assuming my dad would have probably been there too. My wife and I and my kid were all in the area. I could have gone and just showed up. And I had been, I mean, that's the thing, it's something you're thinking about your whole life, you know, do I want to do this? And I've listened to thousands of hours of adoptee podcasts and read everything to read, you know, and that was such a, I was a decision I felt so confident in, of like, of course I'm gonna go find my dad, even though my whole life I've always been trying to manage these expectations, or I guess like I said this the other day in a video I made, I think, where I was like, the way that I felt like I could show love to my dad was by keeping that secret for him. And I did all this preparation beforehand to try to figure out like what I wanted, and to kind of have compassion for my dad, and to, I don't know, I just felt like I needed to do a lot of growing before I went to Ireland. I had planned all this stuff out when I was there. I was so like in my brain, I'm gonna do this. It's just going to happen. And in that moment, I just like didn't do it. And there's like a, you know, deeper story beyond that. Like I just don't really, ultimately I felt like when I was on the plane home from Ireland with my wife and my kid, I realized like I didn't even really, I wasn't even able to share with my wife like the vulnerability that I needed to share to help her understand why that was so important to me. Where she felt like, oh, that was just something like he might have wanted but wasn't so sure about, or maybe it was like, we shouldn't be the people that are going to an unwelcome place, you know? And um so yeah, all that to say, I feel like I learned a lot, and it gives me good material to deal with in life, I guess. And I realized a lot about myself in that moment, of how often I kind of just have always kind of put other people in front of me, not even necessarily as a service, but really like out of this belief that I'm undeserving, you know. And so yeah, that's kind of my story. I mean, obviously there's like ups and downs to all of it, but that's like kind of the adoption narrative, I guess.
Wow. So there's the international piece, the way you felt settled on the soil, or
Yeah,
how
I
it
should
felt.
also say, I kind of forgot. Sorry to interrupt. I
Yeah, go
also
ahead.
have like, I've been in reunion with my mom and my and her family throughout my whole life. And when I turned 18, a lot of the positive was that I started having relationships with everyone. So I have four younger siblings that were, I'm pretty like I'm close, really close with all of them, I should say. I'm close with my mom. I'm close with her husband. We're actually all going on like a family trip for the first time of my life next month, which is really exciting. But and like that is great. It's amazing, but it's also the same thing with my adoptive family, where it's like I'm close to all these people, but like I'm not one of these people in both of my families, you know. So I just have, it's really great. My kid has so many people that love my kid, and I have so many people that love me in the ways that they love me. But that love has not always felt tangible for me from anyone. And beyond that, like, yeah, the more time I spend with my family, the more I realize how much I miss with them. And then beyond that, there's also kind of this like, I have all these really conflicting feelings about adoption, and everyone is pretty supportive of it. I'm not really in anyone's faces about all the stuff I post online, because I don't really think anyone in my life wants to see that necessarily. Not that they would be opposed to it, but just like I don't think most people want to think about adoption unless they're adopted usually. Um, so yeah, I mean it's just a really conflicting position to be in right now. But yeah, basically because I'm a stay-at-home dad, that's kind of been a big part of why I've been doing what I've been doing, and we'll get into that further, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's a great response. And it does again show the complexity of the experience for you from the perspective of your maternal reunion, which in some rough definitional way was always been there or is ongoing. And then the situation with your father. I was really interested how you said it was easy to project onto him, or to say whatever things were going on, I could assign those to him. And do you find that you once you connected to the extent that you did, let's just say that, or learn the things that you did learn, do you find that your your sense of what issues you may have had struggling with had more to do just with being a relinquished person than they did with inheriting a personality trait or something from anyone biologically?
100%. I mean, I grew up thinking all I knew about my dad was the bad things, right? I today I can go on Google and my dad has never made social media because he's never wanted to be found. But I've been able to find more on the internet about my dad and his family than I ever knew growing up. I didn't know anything positive about him. Like I didn't know the sports he played. I didn't know all my mom told me is that like my biological mom told me is that like they like I mean, as I've gotten older, she's told me more, but like, oh, we worked at the same restaurant or something like that. That's like the extent of more information she's given me as I've gotten older. But when I was a kid, it was like your dad got your mom pregnant and then left. That's like all I knew about him, you know? And it's like when you I mean, when I was a kid, it was like 50% of me comes from that person. So that was a lot to try to deal with. And then yeah, like I mean, kind of like to the point you were kind of making, Greg, like especially when I was thinking about going to Ireland, trying to prepare for all this, like I wanted to humanize my dad. All I knew about him was things like the worst things to say about someone, but like he's a person, he's a normal dude, I'm sure, you know, he's just doing what he's doing. Um, and so for me, like I think realizing my dad is his own person and not defining him by that one thing that happened in his life 30 years ago, it helped me a lot with my own like how I feel about myself, but also like it made it less terrifying to like think of my dad as this person who all I know is like this negative stuff about. Because when I was a kid, it was very easy to feel like a broken person. I mean, I still in many ways feel like a broken person, but like especially yeah, as an adult, I guess, like being able to realize um my dad is just a guy and it's not he's not this evil figure, I guess. That was big for me.
Yeah, I really relate to the idea of humanizing him, like you said. And I think at least, as also being an adoptee who wondered about family, right? Wondered about my antecedents, the people that came before me, my biological parents. I found that at least as somebody who was emerging from the fog not that many years ago, I was very focused on my first mother, and I almost couldn't feel what my connection would be to him. It turned out he had died many years before, but I almost felt like I was looking for all these elements of myself in her, trying to explain everything solely through her. And it's very, very interesting to hear what you've said here, which is kind of the antithesis of, or the other side of it, which is what about the things about me when you were young that I'm not sure I like or that are not just challenges. Maybe those came from him. It's really interesting how we do this in our minds back and forth with our natural parents. So in terms of if we could talk about open adoption, and I know that's going to be a really interesting conversation, I think here. Um, and you said you necessarily it can mean a couple different things, or it does mean things differently before you're in it and while you're in it. And you pointed out, the fact that there's this buy-in that has to happen by everybody that's involved in it. I feel like also there are these things that are presented popularly about open adoption. One of them is a coercive appeal, I think, unfortunately, to first parents that you'll have this contact. You'll be able to see your child or get pictures of your child or know what they're doing throughout their life. And then I also feel like there's from the adoptive parent side often this, well, that'll be confusing for the child. They're not going to handle it well. What are they going to think when they have to leave and they go back to with one set of parents versus the other? But could you talk a little bit about the experience of when you saw them in person, when you saw your first mother in person, and then when you do return to your family, what does it feel like? Is it like a disjunctive feeling, or does it present confusion, or how would you describe that?
Yeah, I think like a big chief concern people tend to have with open adoption when they talk about it, and even people that were in closed adoptions, I've heard people say it, is like, oh, the child must be so confused, you know? And like the question is like, well, I've always been curious what people believe that confusion to be. I mean, I think that if I had to guess what people are saying, that it would be the sense of confused allegiances. Like I'm supposed to pick a side, and the side that I should pick is the adopted family, no matter what, right? And I feel like I grew up believing that and feeling that any sign of affection um, in the direction of my family of origin was like a betrayal of the family that I grew up with. And I think some of that was it's probably fair to say some of that was because of the people who raised me in the environment that I was in. But I really think that a lot of that was just like a byproduct of open adoption. I mean, how do you put a kid in the middle of two families and then not have them feel like going in one direction alienates the other side, you know? Um, it was really difficult, and I feel like, um, yeah, in terms of the open adoption stuff, I think to your point, I think it really is like if you look back at when open adoption started and what was the purpose of it, it's hard not to say that the coercive like element of that was a huge reason. I mean, like this was obviously adopted people like Betty Jean Lifton were starting to, share their experiences and advocate for things to be different. But even if we look at the way things are today, there's so many parts of adoption that are not much different than what it looked like when Georgia Tan was, doing her business. And I feel like for me, I think what was really difficult was not being in the driver's seat. I think I've said this before, but like if adoption serves the adopted person, should the adopted person not have some sense of control over what that dynamic, that those relationships look like? Um, and it was like, I mean, it wasn't as if people in my life weren't willing to, I think, like accommodate that. I think it's just that like when you're a kid, it's really hard when you have all of these feelings about everything and you don't know how to verbalize it. How are you supposed to even know what to say, how to feel, or to give yourself permission to actually make a request for something? And as I got older, I think like when I was in high school, I would say, uh, it was really, really clear to me that I wanted to see my mom more, that I really felt like I needed that relationship to be more of a thing in my life. But by that point, it was really unhealthy, kind of the way that I would like what I would really only bring up that need when I was really upset or when my family was having a lot of conflict. So I'd be like, I want to go live with my mom, or I would like run away from home. I'd walk down the street and I was like, well, where do I go? Because I don't know my mom's phone number, I don't have her address, I've never been to her house. So like, what do I do? And so then we'd fight and I would get threatened to get sent to military school. Um, and the only other adopted person that I was friends with growing up, I played basketball with this dude, and he ended up going to the military school that I would always get threatened to get sent to. So I was like, all right, time to be quiet, I guess. Um, but yeah, sorry, I don't know if I fully answered the question, but that's kind
Yeah,
of what I
you
remember.
definitely you've given a great response to it here. I think it's the tug between these poles, right, that you've described here. I mean, as you rightly said, how is it possible not to experience that you're going to lean one way or the other? And of course, as you said, and maybe you were talking about experiencing this while you were with your biological mother in person, but you said I was afraid to display any affection towards. I don't know if that was while you were in a visit with her or just
I
how
think
you
that was
felt.
just life in general, man. Like,
Yeah,
I
really.
think I was a very unaffectionate person as a kid in general because with everyone, I didn't know how to. Yeah, I don't know. I think that
Yeah,
just my brain got broken.
yeah, it's very understandable. Appreciate your candor about all of that. And it is hard to admit, right? What our emotional lives were like and the things that we came out of or continue to develop and struggle with. And I can imagine it certainly didn't aid anything anyway to have that sort of tug of war going on for your loyalties as a person, for your sense of self as an adoptee. So again, appreciate the response about that. What would you say to people who are wondering about open adoption, who continue to advocate it as a better solution? Do you feel it's a better solution or just a lesser of two evils, or what would your perspective be on that?
I mean, I don't want anyone to be under the impression that like I think open adoption is worse than closed adoption. Like, definitely not. You know, like I think like I have so much. I mean, that's the thing. I've had both, right? I have the open on one side and the closed on the other, and I'll take the open over the closed any day of the week. But like, I just think that people don't tend to think very deeply about open adoption, and part of the reason why I started speaking out about this stuff is because I feel like no one talks about open adoption. Like, if you Google open adoption or try to find open adoption on Goodreads or anywhere where books are sold, I think there's like maybe a couple people that have written anything about open adoption that pertains to someone who is older than the age of 5, and none of those things have been written or like none of it's ever in the voice of the adopted person. I feel like I think I've probably in I think there's one person I know, like on social media, who posts who has some level of platform that has also been an open adoption. But everything else, if you even if you go on Instagram or TikTok or any or Facebook, whatever, and you just search open adoption and sorry, and look at videos or reels or whatever, it's like 99% of the time going to be some family that's like patting themselves on the back because look it, we're allowing this child to have a relationship with his natural mother or whatever, and it's like a 5-year-old, but you don't know how the 5-year-old feels, you don't know like what anyone feels. And so for me it's like, yeah, I feel like people, it's not even just that people don't understand, it's that people speak for you like routinely. And I mean, it's not like in the films or in broad society that there's all these people speaking for adopted people, but you know that in these adoption agencies every single day, that's how they're getting these kids. Is they're saying people like Connor grow up and they're super happy and they're super well adjusted because here's this one stat that says open adoption, closed and better adoption. But the question is really like, is that, should that be the question we're asking? Should the question not be what's best for the child, and rather than starting with like two bad options and saying, well, this one's better, and there's nothing we can do, just throw our hands up in the air, right? I mean, like anyone who's done a deep dive on Georgia Tan and adoption prior to all of her crimes can see that like adoption before, you know, the Georgia Tan era was more of a co-parenting relationship. And incidentally, I find it so ironic that so many adoption agencies and consultants and facilitators will literally advertise adoption and say, don't worry, adoption is not co-parenting, even though that's literally what it was when adoption began in this country. And what's the reason that we changed it? Because someone wanted to sell children. You know, when Georgia Tan died and avoided any culpability for her crimes, like, and beyond that, anyone who was involved literally tried to cover it up and absolve themselves and legalize these illegal adoptions. I mean, no one in the industry or the business or anything had any like what for 100 years almost now that we haven't looked back and said, why is it that we're still doing things this way when things weren't done this way before? Why, when we weren't in the United States separating infants from their mothers for the first 3 months of life, 6 months of life, on the recommendation of health professionals, why did we continue the practice of taking them away from their mothers in the hospital just because some human trafficker was doing it, you know? So like, yeah, I mean, it's very easy. I think the most common question people probably ask me is like, well, isn't it open better than closed? But to me, that's such an irrelevant question. I mean, we're comparing Georgia Tan adoptions versus Georgia Tan inspired adoptions, and it's like, well, why can't we look at the part like the adoption that doesn't involve the layers of literal child trafficking that happened for decades in this country? And I'm not trying to like, I mean, I have my own attitudes about it. I don't need everyone to agree with how I feel about all this stuff, but I just feel like as an open adopted, like disregarding however I feel about adoption, like I think anyone who wants adoption to serve adopted people should be asking deeper questions than is open better than closed. Because I mean, you can say that public school or private school, one is better than the other, but not every single kid is going to fit into that bucket, that's not maybe not even a great example because it's like it's so much more than just that. Like if both things are failing, why not create a better option?
That's a really good response, and I appreciate it. And it shows again the desire to center the person who should be at the center, the adopted person or the person going through this experience, and figuring that we are talking about something that should transcend the things that exist right now as options, and the fact that there's not a lot of development from what went on before. But by before, I mean for the last basically 100 years, like you said. And those are the things we're not really addressing, that we're instead comparing, is this better than that? And I think though a lot of people find you on social media, and I think we were excited as a community to see you come onto the scene here to talk about this in particular as a subject, because there have been a lot of people wondering about it, right? Because we've also heard people say this, and of course, as you said here, you would pick this over that any day of the week for the reasons that make total sense, I think. But I appreciate you reframing the perspective and say, let's ask a different question or a deeper question. And I think that's the power of a community like this, is we can have people who say, I know what the perspective is that people have learned, have been propagating, but from my experience, let's reframe this and try to build something different. And that's a really informed experience. So thank you for sharing about that as well. And I think that leads kind of into this whole topic of advocacy, which is, let's say a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago, suddenly Connor is all over the place, right? Suddenly Connor is on the platforms and saying really bold things, and things that I think a lot of people admire and wish that they knew to say. And again, backing it up very, very factually, just like you did right here with talking about the history of adoption in America and how it didn't used to be this. It used to be something totally different when we talked about it. But so you bring that a very informed perspective on how you present your material as well. But how did you decide you wanted to be an advocate, and what has that experience been like for you?
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, like I think I might have said this on a podcast or something, but so I'm sorry if I repeat myself. But for me, I've listened to a lot of the stuff, and again, it's like the moral of the story at the end of every book about the history of adoption is like, well, open adoption fixed everything. And I think I just read enough of those books or listened to enough where it was just not necessarily the adoptee podcasts, but like you just every so often you just hear someone say open adoption fixes everything. And when you like it's just really difficult when you hear over and over and over again, like the one thing that solves this problem is the one thing that it feels like it like blew up my life. And again, it's like, I mean, for many years of my life, I thought open adoption was the greatest thing ever. When I was in college, I made this whole presentation about how open adoption was amazing. And like, like a lot of adopted people, I grew up thinking I'm just going to adopt one day because adopted people need someone who understands what they feel like to care for them. But I think like for me, yeah, I mean, like I said, I think I've listened to a lot of the podcasts, and I just felt like there was a need. I feel like um, like a lot of adopted people have been advocating for a really, really long time, and I feel like for me, I just have the skill set and the experience. Like I come from a background of marketing and like trying to get people to click on stuff. That was literally my profession for like 10 years is like, how do I get people to click on stuff? Like I made like, I was basically like a clickbait like ad buyer essentially. And so my literal job was to try to make things as clickable as possible. And there's people all over the adopted community of adopted people and constellations and anything else that say a lot of really important things, and I feel like the message doesn't get amplified or elevated. There's also the added dynamic of like to be the person that is in front of the camera saying these things, like you make a huge gamble on how that affects your life. And for me, the biggest impediment, I think it was like August last year when I started, was like I was really worried about like, and this, I mean, might sound silly or not silly, I don't know, but like I was really worried about the relationships that could be damaged or if I was gonna like get cut out of inheritances, you know, like how does that affect my wife and my kid? And like, is that really worth, like, is what I'm saying really worth potentially losing anything that I could lose from all of that? Um, and it was really hard, but I mean, I've never had like amazing relationships with my adoptive family, but when I was like coming out of the fog after my kid was born, and I was just in a lot of these comment sections or in forums and having these conversations and just getting beat up by all these people who are like, adoption's beautiful, just shut your mouth. Um, to the point where I was literally banned from like the subreddit, the adoption subreddit. And I was like, that's so stupid. Like, why am I banned from a space to talk, where people talk about adoption? And I wasn't even like, I don't know. I don't need to relitigate history, but I was not. I don't think anything I said was even remotely as out there as what I say publicly now. Um, and I think like that experience of being so like I felt like I was being silenced, and that feels terrible. And I was looking at this subreddit that had like at the time probably like 60,000 people, and I was like, I can build something that has more than 60,000 people like easily. Like I made an Instagram page like 2 years ago that had like 20,000 followers, and I haven't touched, or 5 years ago probably, and I haven't touched it in like 2 years. Just because I am not interested in that anymore. And I was like, why don't I just like I could either try to run for Congress against, my local congresswoman who is the granddaughter of the Qualcomm fortune and got a $7 million campaign donation from her grandfather that I will never be able to compete with, or I can try to like change public perception through social media. And that obviously seems like the much easier option, especially given my background. And so I was like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, I there's so many people that say the important things, and even the books like Nicole Chung's All You Can Never Know is like on the Barnes and Noble bookshelf by my house. It's amazing. But like that's one book in a bookstore full of books. How can that message grow even more? Um, and I just felt like, yeah, I mean, I can do that. And yeah, I'm working on it. I mean, I'm not at the point, I'm not where I want to be, but I'm really happy with all of the people that have resonated with what I've said. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like maybe I'm talking in circles. I just really feel like the message is super important for me. I feel like so many people speak for me, and for all the open adoption adopted people without having any idea of what they're talking about. I mean, no one in my life knew how I felt, myself included, until I was like 28. And 28 was early, I mean, I think everyone in this call probably at some point has been in a call with a young adopted person and like, I wish I knew when I was that young. Even me, I was in a call one time with someone who was younger than me, and I was like, how did I like why did I not feel this way when I was in my early 20s? Um, so yeah, I mean, I think the only way things change is not going to be through legislation unless you mobilize a ton of people, and I feel like that's not easy. And it's just anything to try to make progress is really difficult. And I'm just fortunate enough to be in a position where I have good enough relationships where it felt like I feel like I can risk these things. And if I risk it and everything goes terribly, then it is what it is. But I mean, yeah, I've been making videos for almost a year. My adopted family is like by and large pretty supportive of it. I mean, none of them are watching my videos or anything, but we'll have conversations about it. I mean, when I bought the Primal Wound, my adoptive mother saw that I bought it on her Amazon account, and she bought it and read it, and we had a huge fight after when she read it, because I think both of us were really feeling a lot of those feelings that you get when you read the book. But I mean, the fact that she's read the book in her 70s and is at this point where she's like able to kind of understand how I feel about this stuff, and we're in a better position now than we've ever been. And same with my adoptive father. Like, I think having that it puts me in such a position of privilege over other adopted people. Being able to be a stay-at-home dad and in just my 1 or 2 hours of free time a day, post a video or do what I'm trying to do to like, you know, advocate or whatever. Yeah, I just felt like it was the right time, right place, and kind of right circumstances. Because I know not every adopted person has the means of doing it, or even if they did have the means of doing it, who knows how to, make a social media page blow up. I just felt like, yeah, I've tried to do it before, I've done it before, and why not just be the person that does it, hopefully. Not just because I don't want to be that person. I mean, I don't want people to like be like, you're the guy from that's making me like the thought of like seeing someone on the street that like recognizes me from the internet scares the hell out of me. Like the other day I sent my adoptive parents a screenshot because like Don Lemon from CNN liked one of my videos, and I'm like, that's just like a weird thing to think about, that someone might like recognize me from some stupid video I post on the internet. But like that, yeah, that part of it has no appeal to me. But um, yeah, I just want to change things. Like I'm sick of all the talk, and I've listened to so many podcasts, and I've been in the support groups, and it's great. It's like so much of this is so important for the healing and stuff. And for me, I feel like I'm at a point where I'm good enough, or as good as as I can be. And yeah, like let's fix this system that can be fixed. It's not going to fix the world's problems. It's not going to make adoption perfect. It won't probably erase a lot of the feelings of people that grew up the way that I grew up feel, but like we can do some very, 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 very like basic things to make the system better. And I think most adoption professionals could even admit that themselves. But again, that doesn't change because there's no incentive for it to change.
Yeah, again, really good points. And I certainly appreciate how you said that there's room and need for spaces where the healing begins, where people start to explore what these topics are and they've never maybe talked about it before. Like you said, I knew one guy, one adopted guy growing up, and similar to me, I had some friends, but I never talked about it with them. And then when I found the community and I started to understand more about concepts and get words, that was really important. And I think, as you've said here also, though, there's this other step beyond that. That's the part about moving this into a larger discourse in order to enact some kind of action or change ultimately, which I think has to begin, of course, with influencing opinion, right? Having people to listen to the perspectives that you're sharing and that other adoptees are sharing, and why it matters and why it should be something that they see as a fundamental issue for us. So for the work that you are doing for that, and now that you've said it's not really an objective to be recognized for it in the sense of visible notoriety, or there's Connor, or look at the. I know people are appreciating you in this sense, but let me just assure you, at least for the people I talk to and interact with, that they're all very much excited that you're doing this, because it does seem that you've brought a perspective, again, without it just being the open adoption perspective. There's also a way you have of presenting. And I hear now when you've talked about being a marketer and somebody who's specifically worked in the sphere of how do I attract that kind of following, or build that kind of a base. It makes a lot of sense now to see the reasons for some of the things that you're doing and the way that you're doing them. And I also wanted to hit on with you, if I could, the perspective of a male adoptee, because you listen to a lot of podcasts, as you said, and there are some male adoptees out there speaking about this for sure. But we know that the percentage overall is a lot lower of the male adoptees who are speaking about the experience. But you're definitely someone on the scene now who's doing that, and it's so important. And I wondered what your thoughts were on how we get more of the guys involved and start to hear more from them, because I'm always on a quest to kind of do that. That's why I was really excited that you agreed to speak with me. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. My friend that I mentioned earlier that like got sent to military school, I've been trying to get in touch with him for a while, but like can't even get a hold of him. And I don't know. I don't really know kind of like why it is that the women tend to be the ones that are more represented in like these spaces. I'm also really curious kind of what percentage of adopted people are male versus female, because I feel like at least from what I've read about Georgia Tan, the females were the more like marketable children. It's usually the adoptive mother that wants to adopt, and the mother usually, I would assume, wants to adopt a daughter in many cases, if they have a gender preference. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, not to say that that's a huge reason why men are less involved in these spaces, but I don't know. I'm just curious about that. Yeah, I mean, I never really looked at the gender side of all this stuff, I guess. I mean, for me, I think it was just a matter of like how I got here was how I got here. I don't know how to get guys involved as much as it's just, again, elevating the conversation, and whoever shows up shows up. As a man and an adopted person, though, I feel like, yeah, it is a very interesting kind of dynamic, because there is the relationships, at least for me, are so much about like the women in my life more so than they are about the men in my life. At least like my relationships with my adoptive mother and my adopted and my natural mother, like those relationships were always kind of the primary relationships. And then like I have this distant Irish dad and my adoptive father who's like fine but not super, never super involved. So yeah, I don't know if I have a great answer for that. I mean, I definitely am cognizant of the fact that it's usually women that are messaging. Although I do get like a lot of guys that are messaging me as well, but I think it's really, again, elevating the conversation and making it something that's less taboo. I mean, I think guys in general have a hard enough time going to therapy, but especially when you're like going to therapy for adoption stuff, like for me, it always felt like something that I wasn't really comfortable doing when I was young, and I didn't really know why I didn't want to go to therapy or why I couldn't trust people. And I think some of that had to do with like being a man, but I don't really know how much of it did. I'm not sure.
Thank you for that. Some of the really rich conversations I've had more recently with male adoptees have just given me a lot of hope for that voice to come online more and to start to be more of the larger discourse. And it's encouraging. So thanks again for having your voice out there. And as I've been looking at the chat that's been going on here, I did want to ask a couple things. Part of it will involve circling back around a little bit here to the topic of open adoption and the points have been raised about in the chat around the unenforceable nature of open adoption. And that is such an important issue, I think, to talk about. And the fact that we see so many times that these are closed up, right, by usually adoptive parents, if not almost all the time adoptive parents. But that must be a difficult thing for somebody who's in an open adoption to see that slip away. And I'm not saying that you've seen that slip away, but do you have any thoughts on the unenforceable characteristics of open adoption?
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's really interesting to think about that, because where else in any human experience do we try to tell the future and tell people what their lives will look like? Like, how often when a child is born do you have like a nurse at the hospital or someone tangentially related to this family or this child saying that this is what your future will look like? But for some reason in adoption, we're so comfortable trying to paint a picture of what 10 years from now will look like. As far as the unenforceability goes, I mean, again, it's like you can't, that's the thing, is it's you're painting a picture that you have no clue, even in the best case scenario, that that's what the picture will look like. I mean, there's just no way of knowing. And so as far as like the enforceability goes, I mean, it's like, yeah, to me it feels trivial to even talk about enforceability, because it's like that is a byproduct of the fact that we're like, this is just all like a mechanism of making promises to people. Um, like obviously, legally speaking, it should be like, I think there's a lot to change on the like enforceability side. But at the same time, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I just think adopted people should be in the driver's seat, and if they never want to deal with, like, if with whatever party they don't want to deal with, that's fine. Like I mean, I'm like, for me, when I was a kid, I wanted to go live with my mom, and I wish that I had that opportunity. And if it sucked, then I wanted to go back. And I feel like if adoption really is about the kids and people love the child, and so many people, so often people in my life would say, unconditional love. Well, all this is unconditional, and it really is about the child, and it really is about love. Why not just like follow the child's lead, see what they want, and you know what? If it means that someone else becomes a parent at your expense in any direction, it's for the child's best interest, right? And like, that's like so far ahead in the future if that ever happens. Like, I mean, that seems so insane to think about, that the child would even have any choice in it. But again, like when we're talking about these arrangements, that's what's really difficult for me, is it's like the enforceability is a matter of allowing the child to be a part of the natural mother's life, or the natural mother be a part of the child's life. And really it should be a question of like, how do we care for the child, and secondarily the natural mother, I would say. But like, Yeah, I mean, even the way that we're currently approaching it, as far as like looking at um, being able to try to keep these promises that these adoption agencies make to the natural mother, the natural families. Why are we making these promises to begin with? You know, what is the reason we're making these promises? And why is it so important that in every single case, no matter what, 100% of the time, the natural mother has zero legal connection to the child? Like she has no rights, she's not a parent. Why was it so important for my mother to have no say in what my life looked like? And obviously it's, you know, because adoption requires that. You can't sell a kid for that much money without enforcing that. But again, all of this is just in service of the customers. And if you, I think if I said that in front of my adoptive mother right now, she would agree with me. Like, why there's a lot of adoptive families that want that explicitly, right? I don't want to share. But there's also a lot of people that are want what's best for the child, you know, and maybe it takes a little bit of nudging in the right direction. Maybe it takes a little bit of discomfort. But I mean, adoption was never really meant to be this like solution to infertility or this like alternative, you know, whatever. It's just this weird system that exists because we don't take care of people and because there's money in telling people that they're not a good enough parent, basically. Um, yeah, I mean, my natural mother you know, will probably go to her grave saying that adoption is great and it worked out for the best, and the real issue is, you know, the fathers who leave the mothers and whatever. I mean, she's entitled to have that opinion, but I feel like if we care about the adopted person, like the goal should be to center that person and to create solutions that are going to help that child as much as possible. And I mean, yeah, again, I mean, I don't know. I just maybe I'm talking in circles. Just even the enforceability conversation for me is like it is not even a direct like it's important to have. We need to fix like we need to be able to hold these adoption agencies accountable for the promises they make. But for me, I'm really interested in like no more let's stop adoption agencies and these professionals from making promises that they know they can't keep.
Yeah, that's really good, Connor. And I think also, as you said here, that the element of control is still, it's still shifted from the person involved, right? It's still up to somebody else to decide different things that apply to your life forever. And it's really an unfortunate situation there in that sense as well, that that's ceded, meaning given away, but it's because the when it's entered into, of course, we don't really, as infants anyway, have any say in that. But you would think that, okay, as someone gets older, maybe there's an element of control that does come into the conversation. It unfortunately doesn't seem to in most cases. We still get described as adopted children, for example, right? There's an infantilizing that goes on perpetually about us, and sometimes we refer to ourselves that way. I'm an adopted kid, I'm an adopted child, and I find the language doesn't actually work that well for as we get older. I don't know exactly what we say other than an adopted person, like you've said here. So again, what a great conversation. I know we could go on, and there were a lot of things that you said also would be important to you. Any final thoughts or any topic you'd like to talk about real quickly that we haven't covered?
No, I mean, I appreciate everyone on the call for being here. If anyone ever has like questions or wants to, I mean, I respond to like every message I try to at least that people send to me. If you want me to speak on a podcast or talk, like I try to say no to, I try not to say no to anyone. So, yeah, I mean, as far as like final thoughts, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'm a pretty open book. I mean, I think I like. I just want things to be better for people like us, you know. And I appreciate everyone who is involved, whether it's adopted people, adoptive parents, like not like anyone who's connected to this, you know, these conversations and this movement. But yeah, I mean, it's a really difficult road. You know, when you're in California, you can't even get the state of California, like most progressive state in the country, to give adopted people unconditional access to their birth certificates. Like there's a lot of work to be done, you know, and it's like, you know, I know everyone, probably most people in this call, I'm assuming, are involved in some level, probably even more formally than I am, and have been doing what they're doing longer than I have. I'm pretty new to this, you know. Um, but yeah, I mean, I really appreciate everyone for their interest in this stuff and for caring because ultimately, like, that's what matters, right? Like, I can say what I want to say, I can do what I want to do, but there's no guarantee anything changes or anything's different. Ultimately, it's just like good to be in a place with other people who feel the same way because it makes you feel like you're not alone.
Yeah, I agree. That was a great starting point for me coming into the community that way. And it's still one of the reinforceable things in this sense of that it makes me feel like we are collectively trying to do something here. And hopefully you'll continue with your efforts. We wish you all the success in that and growing the platform to the degree that you're wishing to. And thanks again for your time and for coming out to speak with us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Greg.
Thanks. So for everybody on the call here, what we'll do is we're about to end the recorded section of the call, and then we'll go into the Q&A with Connor. So thanks everybody for coming out to support him.